Conclusion drawn much later, but the numbers were mentioned in that Adiparva shloka, in the Adiparva verse, not shloka. I should not use the term shloka in connection with Mahabharata, because Mahabharata was trying to rebel against shlokas. It was a rebellious text. It was outside the purview of it was outside the arena of the Shastras. It was contemporary of the Shastra. It was the Shastra producing time, and this deliberately remained outside. This 24,000 lines is the first reference to the known version of the Mahabharata, and among those 24,000 lines, there is a reference to a work called Jaya, which is also described as Itihasa. So it is the Itihasa of a Jaya, Itihasa of a conquest. Now many of us, and not those who are present here, but those who are not present here, often ask about the veracity of this war. When did it take place? Did it take place, there is a railway station called Kurukshetra in Delhi. Did it take place there precisely, or where did it take place? Or did one of the characters there is extremely prolific in human genetics? 100 children, were they really there? I must set the context right in order to appreciate what is happening here. And for that, I have to step outside the scope of the Mahabharata and go back to Indian history of Indian people. I mentioned the term genetics. Now, I'm not thinking of eugenics. I'm not thinking of purity of race and stuff like that. That is already done by the late lamented friend Adolf Hitler, and we don't want to repeat what he did. So I'm talking of recent development in ancient DNA and study of migrations of earliest humans, the Homo sapiens, not the Homo erectus, not the other hominins, not the similar kind of human-like species, but just this stupid species which thinks that it is the most intelligent among the animals, and it has described itself as Homo sapiens, the intelligent. My school teacher used to tease me, because I was dull in class, and the dullest child was called as the Buddhiman or something like that. So we done that to ourselves. But we survived. And we survived, perhaps, and I can say this with some degree of confidence, we developed a thing called language, and we weaponized language. We're still weaponizing it in the deadliest possible manner. The worst among the weapons humans developed has been language, and it continues to be so, which I'm using against you at this moment. But allow me. Humans migrated to this part of what we very recently started calling South Asia. Earlier, about a couple of centuries before, the Orient, or by whatever name you call this part of the globe, from Africa to this part of the world, the first serious migration is 65,000 years before our time. But there have been spells of very cold weather in between, and after a gap of another 20,000 years, 45,000 years before our time, people have come. And subsequently, there is another migration which happened from Iran with agriculture. And yet another migration which happened from, if I were to look at the map of India and look at the country's place on the top of our head, like Uzbekistan, and three or four those countries, parts east of that, parts west of that, what a political scientist will call the Eurasian steppes. I used to call it steppes. In this migration, there have been seeds of our civilization, because people came, they mixed. In most cases, Indian women and men who came from outside, they mixed, and we all perhaps go back to the same parents, and all of us, irrespective of caste, religion, whatever, we go back there. There have been some major breaks in this story, and we still do not know how to account for those breaks. And one of the major breaks is the Indus civilization ended, and a new kind of thought, lifestyle, and social practice organization emerged. There is a gap of about 500 years. To give you precise dates, the most mature period of the Indus valleys, we call it civilization. There is no word for civilization in Indian languages. It is drawn from Latin civil. In Hindi they call it sabhyata. In Sanskriti is related to receiving impact of the Sanskrit language, use Sanskriti. By the way, there is no word for myth in any of the Indian languages. Some people called it Danta Katha, some call it Puran Katha. Kannada poet Adiga, Gopal Krishna Adiga, actually, and I am addressing this particularly to my dearest friend Dilip Borkar this evening, because he just returned from a dentist. During the emergency, Adiga wrote a poem called Danta Katha, and it was about it. No, you don't have to speak. Some call Puran Katha, but none of the stories in the Purana are part of Indian mythos. Our myths are drawn from the Mahabharata, partly from Ramayana, and not from the Puranas at all. Therefore, none of the Indian, what we call myths, are from the. Therefore, we have no word for myth so far. I'll come to that also in a little while. The break between the Indus civilization and what followed has been about 500 years. 2500 years before Christ to 1900 before Christ is the Indus period. After a 500 years period of about which we do not know comes the Rigveda from Indo-Iranian. Armenia is the source place of Rigveda. When it brought at least 300 words from Armenian. I mean, some of the most sacred gods that we think are there in the Rigveda, which is God-given word. If today you look at it, their origin is in Turkey and Syria. Don't tell anybody. Soma, for instance. Soma, I mean, if I don't mention Soma in Goa, where else can I do? Those 500 years are the time when major social shifts were happening. The first urbanization had collapsed in the country. Indus civilization was an urban civilization. It just collapsed. It collapsed because people say because of environmental changes. But I'll not get into that. There are other reasons still yet to be explored. But a nomadic civilization was emerging. In fact, in large parts of Rajasthan, Sindh, even today the nomadic society continues, and that has its roots in that. And here come non-urban, rather imposing, rather aggressive people who back home nearly 1200 to 11 or 1200 years before that had not just the Elamite and Akkadian empires, but in different places in the steppes, had developed a unique technique, and that unique technique was to have a cart drawn by a horse. We had not developed the art of tending horses till then. We were very good with our elephants. The first writing of the Mahabharata has reference to an elephant. Reference to horses comes in the Mahabharata at a later stage when destruction begins. Elephant, because Ganesha broke his tooth, and I'm not talking about you, Dilip. Why are you honest? So, this little weapon of a running cart at a great speed with a sturdy horse, from where an arrow could be thrown, enabled people to go long distance and settle there and maybe possess the grazing lands and women. And that happened. And it is through that the Sanskrit language arrived here. From 1400 before Christ, while urban civilization had disappeared and a new kind of nomadic society was impacting with a very powerful language the northwestern and the northern parts of, central northern parts of India, what happened? Somebody had to remember. 8th century before Christ, that is 600 years later, somebody decided to bring all the oral narratives together. And that became the first Jaya, called Itihasa. This is how it was. This is how it has been. Those stories were bare stories. Not much literary glitter there. No play on words and no metaphors and so on. Simple stories. Genealogies, mixed stories of who were the king, and no state apparatus, no state formation had taken place. Because these are new people, they were still, they had fire, they had horses, they had soma with them, and they had women, and they were taking cows or giving cows, and it was a different transaction, different market, different social space. After 800, things in India changed, and a lot of Eastern Indian civilization started impacting India. One was, of course, Gautam Buddha with his Pali. Another was Mahavir Jain with his Prakrit, or both Pali and Prakrit. And a different philosophy, not Vedic philosophy, no idea of mythos, but just the idea of the ethos. The structure of faith, belief was different. Expectations from the society were different. That clash continued. And that clash continued, resulting in the Vedic, remnants of the Vedic people trying to bring together their strength. Just as in the last week of a month, a young lecturer in a university tries to pull all his monies and scrap papers together to meet both aims. From the Vedas, extracts were created called the Upanishads for certain purposes. Similar extracts were, similar passages were extracted for a slightly more advanced purpose called the Brahmanas. Yet advanced purpose, they were called Aranyakas, but the source was the same. It was a loan from your PF fund. great works, great amazing works, and the quality of memory that went into retaining this, they're just amazing, unparalleled in history anywhere else. So I respect that oral tradition greatly. I feel very proud that we had such oral tradition, but without forgetting that on the side was Buddhism in a different language with extremely complex philosophical ideas. And Jainism, for instance, aparigraha, an idea that Gandhi accepted, comes straight from the first flush of Jaina texts. From the 8th century compilation of the Jaya to the 2nd century before Christ compilation called Mahabharat is another 600 years. And in between comes a contact with Greece, whether Indians impacted the Greek poets and they created epics, or whether Greeks impacted Indians and they created epics, is a futile kind of charcha. Futile charcha. Because it adds neither to a knowledge of the Greek epics nor to the knowledge of the Indian epics. But some similarities are, for instance, the character that Bhima kills with using Gada is made invincible. It's completely immune to any attack, except for one small portion of the body. And Krishna tells Bhima ki aapka jo Gada hai, Gada Yuddha is the mode chosen by Bhima in that particular combat on the 15th or 16th day of the war. He chooses to hit precisely there, absolutely to the point. And then Duryodhana dies. Achilles' heel is, Achilles was dipped in the Tigris, Euphrates, whichever that river is, and whatever the river is, and but for the heel, and therefore the Achilles heel remained there as vulnerable part. These similarities are not coincidental. Setting aside all these similarities, I am trying to say that after 600 years of the first retelling of all that happened between 1400 to 800 had to be told, and the lines had blurred, memories had faded, and many new things had happened. I mean, it's almost like telling a story 1200 years after it had happened. We are in 22, and supposing we were to tell a story about India in year 1000 or 1100, we would be fumbling actually. We don't know whether Meera was given poison in a glass vase or glass, glass kaach ka pela, ya brass ka pela, ya or mitti ka pela. We know that she had to drink poison. Because history, as we understand history, had blurred for the man who compiled the Mahabharata. He had to invent various methods in compiling what he was doing. That compilation came to about 1 lakh lines, and it remained in oral tradition. Very often that got written, handwritten, produced in manuscripts after every 3, 4, 5 generations. Yet it remained at manuscript level till Mr. Bhandarkar set up the Bhandarkar Institute, and 3 generations of editors lavished their editorial care and finally produced the 18 volumes of the Mahabharata. So if somebody says, when was the Mahabharata written? The clear answer is, it was written in the 20th century. That's a factually absolutely correct answer, and for that they had to take help of about 1100 different manuscripts, not one matching with any other manuscript. So if you read the Bhandarkar Mahabharata, you will notice that there is a nasate bhavato vidya na bhavo vidyate sata. 7 variations are there. And it says, well, the Patan manuscript has this, Sankhela manuscript has not vidyate bhava but bhavo vidyate, something like that. and the meaning change. Meaning change. Leaving that aside, let me go to this, the 1 lakh lines of the Mahabharata in the oral tradition there. Did Vyasa, in the first place, did Vyasa write it? Let me say yes, because there is a Krishna Dvaipayan, that is a man living on a dark island. And my friend Sri Aurobindo, I feel very close to him because I studied his works. And he said probably somewhere on an island. So did he come from the Andamans or which island or Dwarka bed? Because that would be a very nice theory. Or was it just a dark hill somewhere? Genetics now says that there is a community in what used to be Andhra Pradesh earlier. Now it is split into so many states are split into 2 or 3. These are splitting times for us. Vyasya is a community where no marriage has taken place outside the community for the last 3,000 years. This is what David Rick of Harvard Medical School has. So whether he was a man from, or a community from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and who wrote the 1 lakh verses, is difficult to say. Because this Vyasa is ascribed several other texts. Not just, there is Hari Vansh from the Bhagavad. So, this 1 lakh lines. But we have to be content with that. We cannot ask for greatest clarity on any of these things. And therefore, focusing on that text of 1 lakh lines, as if it is the Mahabharata, one can say so much. That, and I am repeating Sri Aurobindo. Aurobindo said, comparing Valmiki and Vyasa, Valmiki's Ramayana was written a century before the Mahabharata was written. While the war described is older than the war in the time in the Ramayana. But there's no problem because now we're getting movies on Padmavati, whereas some 50 years back we used to get movies on Jyotiba Phule, or Savitri Phule. That is a movie about a former time coming later, but a movie is a movie. These, Aurobindo says, comparing Ramayana and Mahabharata, Valmiki, he says Ramayana is a greater poem, but Vyasa is a greater poet. Fascinating observation. Then he explains, and Sri Aurobindo, when he writes, paper was not so expensive in those days. Every sentence runs into 2 or 3 pages or something like that. Long sentence. Aurobindo says, if Valmiki observes something, he lavishes great labor on elaborating. Supposing Ram and Sita meet after a long gap and they look at each other, then Valmiki has 16 lines to describe how their eyes looked at each other. 16, not one less. And then of course, the entire night passed like that, and then they said, the night is over, but the talk is not over. How? If Valmiki spent 16 lines on that, night is going to pass. Aurobindo says Vyasa is a greater poet. Vyasa does not stop at all in his descriptive trajectory. We have seen on television this Draupadi Vastra Haran, which went on for 6 weeks. For Vyasa it takes a single line. Believe me, in the Mahabharata of Vyasa, this is not, there are a few questions she asks, but those questions are not elaborate questions, not like the Hindi movies. They're simple, they are half a line or quarter line questions. Vyasa is a poet in a rush. Valmiki loves his poem, but Vyasa is not worried about his poem. Vyasa was worried about the time that he was trying to depict. And as a result, Vyasa is found in that poem not liking any of his own characters. If you look at how he set the characters, we like them. The story is fantastic. And it's so heroic, so enchanting, so no length of storytelling of the Mahabharata will tire anybody. I grew up listening the stories from my grandmother or grandfather or mother or father, and every time my eyes shut, I said, please continue. And they continued. Generations after generation, people have done this. Vyasa is not interested in the characters. He is interested, and the most care that he has shown in depicting any character, it is not any of the Pandavas, any of the Pandavis, any of the women and the Bharata Vansha, any of the Kurus, any of the other Rajas, or any of the other Ranis. He has been extremely attached to one character, and that is Yama. Now, where does Yama come in the story? Actually, he is not there in the story, but he is everywhere. There are two such characters, there are two such personas in the Mahabharata. One is Vyasa himself. Vyasa is there at the beginning of the story. I mean, Vyasa is asked to do wonderful things in giving birth to children, and Vyasa is there at the end of the story, saying that this is how it happened, and alas, this is how. And he says it when all the characters except two of them are around, and that is Dharmaraj and a dog. So Vyasa, Dharmaraj and a dog, that's the family. Now Dharmaraj is described both in Adi Parva and also in the last 2 or 3 books of the Mahabharata were super added afterwards, accretions. But even in the Sabha Parva, there is appearance of Yama, and therefore it is consistent with that is in the middle of one of the middle-ish book, and therefore the last book is consistent with that. Dharmaraj is the son of Yama, and that's why he is called Dharma. He has another name, but this is his grand name. Vyasa is devoted to that character because Yama, who in Vedic literature is an incestuous character. There is in Yami dialogue, with both of them, and probably we have to, when we have more on ancient DNA, we will know if these migrations and mixing of men and women had anything to do with that. At the moment we do not know. Maybe some Vedic scholars do know. Vyasa was interested in time. Yama and Niyama together form time. So this Mahabharata is a poem about time, and his greatest visible icon or symbol at the optical level of the Mahabharata is not so much a horse or a crown or a bow and arrow. The Ramayana has arrow and bow as optically most present. Beginning with Dasharatha, going to the twin children of Lavakush of Rama. Here, the optical center, the visual center of the Mahabharata is a chakra. And that chakra also is described as Kala Chakra. It is Yama's chakra. Yama is Kala. So it is the cycle of time that fascinates Vyasa. not so many characters. He's trying to look at a vast spectrum of time, trying to encapsulate, compress it in the form of a story. Now, yeah, you want me to stop? I'll take about 4 or 5 minutes more.
Don't stop.
You know, there's a lovely character in the Mahabharata who is deprived of everything. First, his mother has killed 7 of her children. The 8th one remains there. He's very brilliant. He studied. He spent some time with his mother, and it's like a Govani child studying in Oxford or Cambridge, coming up. He's deprived of opportunity of getting married. Then he's deprived of opportunity of ruling, though he's the eldest. So he decides, when his time comes, to wait till Dakshinayana is over and Uttarayan begins. So I can wait for what? This Kala Chakra is the center of Vyasa's narrative. And his difficulty was that before him a Buddha had happened, and before him a Mahavir had happened. The second difficulty was that Sanskrit was not the only advanced language at that time. Tamil, or what we can call Proto-Tamil, had been around, and Tamil itself was fairly advanced by the time he was writing this. 3 philosophical languages, Pali, Prakrit, Tamil. 3 different philosophies, Jainism, Buddhism and the Vedantic wisdom. If Vyasa had to make his story authentic, he had to make an utmost effort to not be seen being influenced by any of these. That is, if somebody is writing in the 21st century and wants to be seen like a 14th or 15th century writer, like Tukaram or Namdev or Kabir, is quite a challenge. Vyasa manages it by inventing a metrical deviation, and that is a wonderful contribution that he made to poetic tradition in India. The Vedas had in them, Rig Veda particularly, 72.5 meters. Ramayana tried to create a new meter, but Vyasa perfected that meter and made poetry easy to remember. The Vedic poetry, the Richas, are remembered, but those who remembered the Richas also had to remember the rhythm of the Richas, otherwise the meaning would change. Whereas in Vyasa's case, he created a meter which, whichever way it was uttered, had ease of conveying the meaning that the lines contained. I'll not get into the the prosody of the poem. Vyasa had to create something else, and that is, in order to sound credible, in order to give credence to this history of Jaya as history in times when it was almost forgotten, he had to invent, he had to generate, create, fabricate, conceptualize a new understanding of time itself. I mean, he did not go for what is history, he did not go for the question what is history, he went for the question what is time. And that's why his most favorite character, Kala, Yama. Vyasa's theme is not the war, the destruction caused by the war. That is the substance that he is using in the theme. But the theme was present time at 4 different levels. One is, call it a cosmic time. Again, cosmos is a Greek word. Vishwa, perhaps, but I'll not get into this jugglery with Greek words, Latin words, Sanskrit words, since I'm able to communicate what I want to say. A cosmic time, where beginning is there before the beginning we know, and then end is there after the end we can experience. And therefore Vyasa spends a huge portion of the second part of the first book in piling genealogy on genealogy on genealogy. In this little book also, I thought I should give a test of these genealogies, and he begins with creation of stars, then animals come, then out of animals somebody marries a human. It's strange. But a much larger time. Then Vyasa also must have a history time. And for that history time, which is major time, measurable time, he has to say that children studied for so many years. They fought in year such and such. Then they went out and plunged for a kingdom for 1 year as on trial, the apprenticeship. They are on probation. And then after the probation is over, the blind king says, no, you cannot own this, you must move to the other department. So all that is timed in human time, in calendar time. And names of months, the nakshatras that will go with those months are all planted there to make it look like history time. 18 days, the war is fought for 18 days. 18 is a very favorite number for this poem. 18 days war. Then there was, when the Gita was added to it, it had 18 adhyayas and so on, so that they looked organically linked. I said I will comment on the Gita. Gita has the lucidity of verse that the Mahabharata has. Gita is easy to recite and apparently easy to understand, though not everybody understands the Bhagavad Gita. The Gita has added to it, super added to it, about 3 sections at the end, which deliberately talk about the social classes that the Mahabharata describes. The idea of Punarjanma, the idea of gunas. If you don't perform your duties now, then next time, you won't have a good time, etc. All that. But the Gita leaves a little clue to its being super added, and that is Kurukshetre, Dharmashetre, Samaveta, Yutsa, Mamaka, Pandavashanga, Kim Kurvata Sanjaya. What did he say? The Gita comes in the middle of the description of war in the Mahabharata as we know it today. In that description, the speaker would have said, well, this is happening. It is saying, what did happen at that time? That is a text which is written afterwards about that war. What did happen at that time was then placed within the war description. And this is a generally accepted view of the Bhagavad Gita. Yet, it is part of the Mahabharata as we know it today. And therefore, I accept it as part of the Mahabharata. I have no problem accepting it as the cosmic time, history time. Then there is, when Arjun, now I am talking within the Gita, about the Gita, and I'll give one more example. Krishna says, do you not believe in all that I say? Just look at this. And Arjuna says, a Virat Rupa, which is limitless, absolutely. And it's in one moment. It's one moment. And so it is not cosmic time. It is not historical time. It is a time in the consciousness. Like James Joyce's Ulysses. It's time in the consciousness. So there is the psychic time, psychological time in one's psyche. So there is this psychological time, there is the historical time, there is cosmic time, and there is a mythological time. And the mythological time is created by Vyasa by depicting every character as if it is not real, but as it is mythological. And therefore, it is difficult to say which of them are historically there, correct, verified or verifiable, which of them are purely mythological and therefore not historically true. In fact, it would be quite inappropriate to ask the question as to which part of the Mahabharata is history and which part of the Mahabharata is myth. Because Mahabharata is neither dealing with history as an order of things or myth as an order of things, but altogether a different order of things. And that order of things is Mahabharata is dealing with one's understanding of time and nothing more. That method of dealing with the past, dealing with time, has impacted Indians all through the centuries, and we continue to internalize that method, no matter to which tribe or which caste or which religion we belong in this country. No offense to any other religion, that it is, but it has become a second nature for us here, and that is why we turn living human beings into superheroes. I mean, somebody, let's say this desk is only 22 inches long, but somebody says it's 56 inches. We accept. Giving superhuman, or somebody is working for, let's say, 12 hours a day. Then is no, that person is keeping very close eyes on everything 24 hours a day. We learned that. It is our undoing, but it is also in some of the mid 20th century English novels, like Raja Rao's Kantapura, for instance. Gandhi becomes a superman because he is walking from this with a stick, and some 20, 30 followers or 60 followers from Sabarmati to Dandi. Gandhi is walking, becomes Superman. He is Superman of innocence, Superman of purity. I mean, it can happen again also. We internalize it. We can't help it. Now, Vyasa's greatness is in avoiding immediate impact of Buddhism, Jainism, Dravidism, remaining within the so-called Sanskrit sphere of knowledge, and yet inventing a completely new method of looking at the past, which is neither the mythic order nor the historic order, but order altogether different. And that I call the Mahabharat way of looking at the past. We are a nation, I'm not talking about the Constitution of India, which says India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. Physical states, as well as mental states. I'm not talking about that. But we have been a nation, when we were not this union of states, when we were probably so many chota kachara kingdoms, we were a nation. What else? Because history has trashed them. What history has trashed has to be described as trash. So, we have been one people because we belong to this method of looking at the past. And the best comment on the Mahabharata is not about the Mahabharata. It is by Premchand. It's the opening of a story of Premchand. इस देश में किसके बाप ज़्यादा रईस नहीं थे? Everybody's grandfather is a great person. The Mahabharata method, the cosmic time. Sorry. Everybody's school teacher is a great yogi. Cosmic time. Anyway. The Mahabharata is unique. And despite our becoming modern, it allows us to carry that tradition, because that tradition of looking at the past is no threat to our being modern. Mahabharata is a wonderful work because it is neither myth nor an epic. Mahabharata, despite not being such a great poem as Sri Aurobindo said, shows the greatness of the poet. And I think this character Vyasa must be a fascinating character, whether it was a person or a community or an entire generation or a strategy making group of experts. What is it? Think tank. But this think tank, this person has thought about time and the work and this history that it was trying to compress in such an organic way that being organic has become the highest civilizational value for us in South Asia. I feel very nice being here. If I die, I would like to die in this country. And, whether I have Aadhaar card or not, like to because I have this kind of access to this kind of consciousness. Thank you so much. Chelsea. I wrote this little book because Surekha, my wife, decided to lock me inside a room when Corona came, and she said, "Please go and work." So I wrote it when Corona started in a frenzied manner, non-stop. Thankfully, she gave me food when I was writing. Being on my own, I mean, I say I have been making notes on the Mahabharata from the time I was 25 years old, and now that I am in my end of last over, being on my own, I thought I would open the book of my memory and paint a portrait of a poem that has been speaking to the nation for 2 millennia. I had done it in the hope that the future world is free of all viruses, tangible and abstract. My mind is at peace with the future.